Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, you will know that I love isolated horror films, and in fact, I see horror isolation as a subgenre on its own. So I've decided to pick out 10 horror movies that have that isolated feel to them that I want to discuss today. Now, this list of 10 horror films aren't in any order. I've not done a top 10 isolated horror films, although that would be quite a good idea. But when you see the films on this list, you'll probably know what the best ones are anyway. But I've just chosen 10 random ones that I think are really good ones. First up, we've got The Thing from 1982. This is set in Antarctica about these groups of guys or girls who are on Antarctica. There's obviously nowhere to go in Antarctica, and even if there is somewhere to go, if you're under attack, you're going to freeze to death outside, so you have to remain indoors as best as you can, or as much as you can. And I think with the film The Thing, that plays it really well because you know it's too deadly to go outside, and there's people around you that you just don't know who they are supposed to be. So even though Antarctica is one of, if not the biggest continent on Earth, there's just nowhere to go. Next up, we've got Misery, which is set in a farmhouse in snowy Colorado. Now, the place looks really nice, very beautiful, and there is a little town and village around, so it's not totally isolated. But the problem with this one is the main character, Paul, he's stuck in a house with this crazy woman around, doesn't know where she is because he's bedridden, and he can't really go anywhere. There's nobody he can phone because she's cutting the wires to the phones, etc. So he's isolated in this big house himself, not knowing if and when he's going to die. Next, we've got 30 Days of Night from 2007. That's set in Barrow, Alaska. Now, this place does have 30 Days of Night 2 times in the calendar year. So we do get 30 Days of Night twice. Now, I need to read it out, guys, because it's no longer called Barrow, Alaska. It's now known as Utkvagik. Vik. I've totally butchered that, but that's what it's now known as. This one, of course, has a great setting for a vampire film because vampires traditionally are scared or they can't go into sunlight. And what better place to go than a place that has 30 Days of Night 2 times a year? Frozen from 2010 is up next. No, not the cartoon from Disney, but the horror film from Adam Green, where these 3 people who are going to this ski resort and they want to get up on the ski lift, and as they're about to get onto the ski lift, the place is about to close for the weekend. I can't remember if it's 3 or 4 days it's going to be closed for, but they get on that ski lift anyway. People are miscommunicating with each other, and then they end up getting stuck up on the ski lift, which is lots of feet in the air, and they're stuck there overnight. And they think, okay, we can survive the night, but they suddenly realize that the place is going to be closed for the holiday weekend, so they're going to be stuck there forever. If they don't get out of there, they're going to die, of course. And there's so many things that can happen in this film where if you try and get down, you're going to break your legs, possibly die. And then they find out there's wolves down below. So even if they do survive the fall, then they've got to fend off these deadly wolves, etc. So there's a lot of things that happen in this one that is fantastic, but it's a really good isolation film. Next up, we've got Geralds Game from 2017. This is set in a romantic getaway cabin in Maine. Now, this sounds all very sexual and romantic, and it actually sounds like a nice time, but of course, the main character, he has a heart attack and dies, and then this woman is stuck tied to a bed in the middle of nowhere. She can't get to a phone. There's nobody she can get to, and the doors and things are left open. Because it is a cabin in the middle of nowhere, they feel like there's no need to lock the doors. So as she's chained to this bed, there's nothing she can do, and then she has to fend off what comes in to the cabin, as well as have her partner who's down in the ground dead. The Ruins from 2008 is up next, and this one is set in Mayan ruins in Mexico. Now, I always feel like it's quite scary going to Mexico anyway, because if you do get lost, there's nobody you can really speak to properly unless you can speak their language. But having it set in this old Mayan ruin, not knowing if it's supernatural or not, and not being able to speak to anybody, and then being stuck there as well, with obviously the events that occur and the things that happen to the characters in the film is bad enough, but have it been isolated in the middle of nowhere in a country that you know nothing about, that's pretty scary. Next up, we've got Creep from 2004, and this one is a little bit closer to home to me. Well, it's about 400 miles away, and this one is set in a London underground. Now, you'd think, well, you can go up the stairs and then there's lots of people there, but this one is set late at night at the weekend. This girl is stuck underneath the London underground. Not only is she stuck there and isolated, but there's someone or something that is stalking her as well. So that's quite scary. Now, one of my scariest films of all time is An American Werewolf in London, and one of the best scenes in that is the London Underground. So imagine having that setting for the entire film. It's pretty scary. Next up, we've got Hush from 2016, and this is the second Mike Flanagan film on this list. And this one is about a woman who is living in a secluded house in the middle of the woods. I don't know what it is about films that are set in the woods with Mike Flanagan, but he chooses them wisely. And that's quite scary enough because you've got someone outside stalking this woman and she's helpless because she's isolated in the woods. But if you mix it in with her being deaf as well, it just adds that extra layer and element to the seclusion and isolation to the story. Next up, we've got the remake to Dawn of the Dead from 2004. This one's set in a Milwaukee mall. Now, the reason I've chosen the remake over the original is I didn't feel like the original felt isolated enough. I know that the whole world's gone to pot and they're stuck in this mall for most of the film. Obviously, that's what happens in the remake as well, but there's something about the remake that just felt more isolated and scary. Maybe it could be the faster running zombies, I don't know, but it just felt more enclosed. Maybe it's because we got to know the characters a little bit more. No idea, but I felt like the remake felt like they used that isolation better than the original. It doesn't mean that the remake is a lot better than the original, even though I do prefer. Doesn't mean it's officially better though. I just felt like the isolation aspects of the remake worked a little bit better, and it certainly did, because the isolation feel that you get to this film is fantastic. Last up, we've got I Am Legend from 2007. It's funny because this film is set in New York City, a place where you shouldn't feel isolated, but the film is about a man who is the last man on earth, and he just wanders around the city. Now, the city is obviously vast. He's got the whole place to himself, and you think, well, he's not isolated. But if you're the last man on earth, or if supposed to be the last man on earth, nobody to talk to, then it will feel quite closed, or enclosed, I should say. So yes, even though he is in one of the biggest cities in the world, he's still isolated, especially when these horde of zombie-like creatures are coming after him as well. Very cool isolation film. So that's 10 isolation horror films that I could think of that I actually really like. But are there any more isolated horror films that you guys like? And would you consider isolated horror films as a subgenre on their own? I certainly do, and they are one of my favourite subgenres that maybe I've just made up on my own, but I do love that isolation feel to a horror film. But leave your list down below, guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of my list as well, and I'll talk to you soon.
Meeting adjourned.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back!